ooh. The closed captioning, I could have it in.
No, don't change the language.
You're no fun. Kathleen didn't want me to choose Chinese or Arabic or Hebrew. She's such a spoiled sport. Okay. Tonight we're going to talk about Sonoma and iOS 17 and so on and so forth. But first, we're going to have questions and answers. And as always, they can be about anything as long as it's related to Apple hardware or software. So, any questions?
Lawrence, I have a request. A
Yes.
few weeks ago, we talked about our favorite apps for the
Yes.
Macintosh. Well, I have a favorite app that you might want to mention to others for the iPhone and iPad. It's called Photo Card, made by Bill Atkinson
Yes.
in the App Store. Since we're coming up on Halloween, Thanksgiving, and Christmas, it's a really nice app for sending a card. I mean, it looks like a postcard via email to a group of people, like groups in the contacts list. So you might want to mention that to folks tonight in our regular meeting.
Yeah.
Is that with a PH or an F?
PHOTO, photo card, 2 words.
Bill Atkinson is the Apple inventor of QuickDraw, which was it's kind of hard to explain what it is, but in the original Macintosh, when it drew things on the screen, it was using QuickDraw, which was a mathematical language for rapidly putting up graphical information. And it was revolutionary at the time, and it allowed the Mac to have a bitmapped display at the time that everybody else was using basically a dot matrix characters on a TV tube. It was what set the Mac apart from everybody else. And in fact, it's what made me buy one of the first Macintoshes. We were living in Japan at the time, and the chief meteorologist for the US 7th Fleet picked up one in Hong Kong the day they went on sale in the United States. He picked up one in Hong Kong at a Hong Kong computer store. I guess it was technically a day later because, never mind. He picked up one, he brought it, and his daughter, Emily, had been using it. And during the demo, he wanted to do something, and it spit out the disk that it had because it only had one floppy disk drive, and it asked for Emily's disk. And Kathleen and I saw that, and we were instantly sold on it, because prior to that time, if you had a computer that had only one floppy drive and it wanted another one, you put it in there, it just assumed it was the right disk, and if you told it to write over the top of something, it would. But this one spit the disk out because it said it wasn't Emily's disk, and it refused to do anything until it got Emily's disk. And we just thought that alone was brilliant, plus the bitmap graphics, even though they were only black and white. So we were extremely impressed with it. And I bought a Macintosh downtown Tokyo at Akihabara. They had one on display. You came into the top floor of this building down. Actually, it was on the Ginza. It wasn't Akihabara. Top floor, they had cut off all the lights and they had a pillar in the center with a light coming down on it. And I said, I want to buy that. And they said, well, that's our display. And I said, I don't care, and I want to buy it. So I got the first one sold in Japan. But Bill Atkinson was the one who developed this way of rapidly displaying things on screen with great precision. We do not really use it today on macOS 10 because macOS 10 is based on Unix and a bunch of other things. And they used a new type of system called Quartz. You might occasionally see in technical documentations references to Quartz, but Quartz uses a bunch of vectors to draw things on the screen very rapidly. and it requires staggering amounts of computer horsepower that they didn't have back in the day. The original Mac, as I recall, had a 4 megahertz 68,000 processor, which is we now have processors that are literally millions of times faster running on our Macs. So, but PhotoCard was designed by Bill Atkinson because he made a lot of money and he decided he didn't want to be a programmer his entire life. So he went into photography. He's got a big website talking about photography. And this PhotoCard is free. You can download it and you take a picture with your iPhone and you can format it as a postcard and send it off to somebody without leaving your phone. It's really quite cool, and you can't beat the price. There are other ones that do this not as well that cost money. So if you want to do that, you can, but I'm quite impressed with PhotoCard. Anything else?
I have a quick question,
Yes.
Lauren. I'll say in about the last month or so, I've been getting these strange junk mails to my iCloud email account. And I generally don't use that account and I rarely get an email on it. And I just wonder if anyone else has that happening. They have titles, but there's symbols mixed in with the title. So it's a dead giveaway. They look like really weird. So I just right click and I send them to junk. But is there anything else I can do to stop that?
I can give you some general things to do with what junk mail is, but let me back up to it for a second. It's not that your iCloud account is hacked. I use my iCloud account as my principal account. I have lots of other accounts. The one for Strait Macintosh User Group is separate from the rest of them. The one for my church is separate, and so on and so forth. But most of the rest of my stuff goes through my iCloud account. And the reason is the security is much better. And when I say much better, on a factor of 1 to 10 is about 10 times better than anybody else out there. Having said that, sometimes you can think that your address was compromised when it really wasn't. I had a Yahoo account because once upon a time Yahoo had a photo sharing site, and I can't remember the name of it. It was offhand, but it was owned by Yahoo. And so I set up an account with Yahoo so I could post photos, and it wanted a backup account. And for a backup account is if you lose your password, what's your backup account so you can log in. And I thought, well, I don't want to lose track of my photos, so I gave it a backup account, which was my .mac account. Well, Yahoo has been hacked 3 times, and the first time they got 1 billion email addresses. The second time they got 1.5 billion, and the last one they got like 2.4 billion addresses. And originally it was thought that they only got the addresses themselves, not the passwords and so on and so forth. It later turned out that they did get the passwords, but I didn't care because I changed the passwords as soon as I found out it was hacked, so that they didn't get my password. However, they did get the backup email account. So even though you wouldn't use your iCloud account for anything, at some point you might have used it for a bank or for a credit card or for a grocery store or something else. And if they got hacked, then your account is available to hackers to spam you, not to break into your machine, but to spam you or to trick you into giving up some information about yourself. The other way that people can get that account is that somebody you know could have a machine that got compromised. 99% of the compromised machines in the world are Windows machines. And most of your friends probably have Windows machines. So if one of them gets hacked and they at some point exchanged email with you, now the hackers have your email account. So that's probably why it's getting those email messages. In terms of dealing with spam, a couple things that I do is that every now and then I will go through and sort my mail by who it was sent from. And if you sort it by who it's sent from, quite often a lot of the hackers will use the same thing over and over and over again. Right now I'm getting something from Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo, in case you hadn't noticed, has also been hacked. So I might get like 60 messages from Wells Fargo. I don't have an account at Wells Fargo. I just delete them all, and I can do it all at once because they're sorted by who sent it. The other thing to note is, as you noted, they have these strange symbols at the top. If you sort your emails addresses alphabetically, at the very start, you're going to have things like emoji because of just how the Mac sorts things, how computers sort things. At the very start, you're going to have things that have emojis at the start of the subject line. And so they'll all be there together, and you just kill them off, because most human beings don't start an email with an emoji.
Right.
The reason why hackers start it with an emoji is because if you sort things alphabetically, they'll be right at the top when you go to look at your email. So take advantage of the fact that they think you're sorting your messages by alphabetically, sort them by subject, sorting by the subject line. When all of those appear at the top, just get rid of them. The other thing that I do is that most people only get email in English. And if you get emails in Japanese or Farsi or something else, they'll most often be clustered either at the very start or at the very end. So if you get a bunch, if you sort them again by the subject, then you'll have a whole bunch of foreign languages at the start and a whole bunch of it at the end, and you can just kill off sometimes hundreds of messages at once just by sorting them that way. I also would urge you to all the time go into your spam mail and your junk mail and just delete it. A lot of people, they put it in junk mail, but they don't delete it, or they don't empty their trash. This one woman, she had an iPhone that had the standard 5 GB iCloud account, and she was running out of space, and she said, I don't have anything on my iPhone. Yeah, but she never deleted any of her junk mail. She never deleted any of her trash. I deleted both, and she had, that was half, it was half the space on her iPhone was just messages that she wasn't looking at anymore, but they're still there until you delete them. So sort your email to get rid of a lot of the spam, and then delete your spam and your trash to free up space.
Okay. I only get like one a day, but they all kind of have a similarity, and somewhere in the address it says POP, which seems odd, and then it has like these asterisks or hyphens or things between the letters. But I get a lot of them. It just seems strange. I've never gotten ones that look like that before.
Quite often, spammers will try to get around things like, for example, right now, almost everybody on the planet is getting spam email about your McAfee account has expired. McAfee is an antivirus software that most manufacturers, Windows manufacturers, include a 90-day account. When they sell you a new machine, they say, comes with McAfee. They don't tell you that it's only for 90 days and then you have to buy it. So most PCs come with McAfee, and they know that most people won't renew it, but it'll still come up and flag them. So in order to make it look like it's from McAfee, they will send out spam email that says it's from McAfee, and we received your order for $468 to renew your McAfee account, which is way more than it costs, hoping that you'll panic and log on there and tell them something that allows them to charge you real money. In order to get around the fact that people are now very suspicious of McAfee, people will go through their mail and they'll sort, and they'll say, search for everything that has McAfee and clump them all together so I can get rid of them all at once. One way around that is to put spaces in the word McAfee. So they'll have MC space AFF AFEE, so that it still says McAfee, but it'll get rid of that. It'll bypass that screening process, and they'll stick in little apostrophes or hyphens or other things to space it out, so that they're still sending you the same spam, but they're hoping that it gets past your anti-spam controls. So that's why you see a lot of that. When you see something about POP, quite often it could be referring to an older protocol used in for email called POP, which stands for Post Office Protocol. Most people today, they should be using something called IMAP, which is much faster and convenient and so on and so forth. IMAP's the modern way of doing it, and POP is the older way of doing it. And it's possible that that at some point it was passing through a pop account. So that might have something to do with why it
Yeah.
pops there.
Thank you.
Marcia?
Yeah, I don't know whether you're going to be able to help me with this or not. I get the New York Times, I have Safari, and I have Gmail. And when I try to send an article from the New York Times to somebody else, I used to do it without any problem at all. Now I get this message that says I can't connect to the Gmail account, and then it has my Ruby rating, and it asks for the password. So I tried to put in the password that I had, and it doesn't like that, of course. So I went into Gmail, changed my password, still didn't like it. So I thought, well, maybe it's the New York Times problem. So I went to the New York Times and changed my password there. Doesn't have any effect at all. So do you have any idea what the problem is?
I've been having problems with authentication with Gmail myself, in as much as I know my password is correct and so on and so forth, but quite often I'll get an error if I try to send through things through Gmail. And part of that has to do with that Gmail is not really an email system. Gmail is really just a whole bunch of web pages. When you get your email in Gmail, it's accepting email, but it's being stored in Google as web pages, because Google's all about web. So all of your email, you can go look at your Gmail with a web browser, and it's actually more full featured than if you try to use an email client for it, because it's web pages. And I think that Gmail recently has some kind of issue with their authentication. So your password's probably just fine, but the handoff between the New York Times and Gmail isn't working right. And I've had the same problem, and sometimes I just don't do it that way, and I do it some other way. But it's not you. I've had the same problem with New York Times. My daughter has an iCloud account, and she has a Gmail account. And I was sending it to her Gmail. I was sending things that I wanted her to read to her Gmail account because she shares it with her husband. It's both of their names at Gmail, but it was stopped working. So I'm just plaguing her with it. But I don't have a solution. I just have seen the same thing. That's all I can tell you.
Okay, what I've been doing is copying the routing thing and putting it in an email to send. So that's how I'm working around it. But you think that eventually they'll solve the problem?
I don't know. I don't know. Google and Apple and Microsoft are all working to try to wean us away from passwords entirely and use pass keys. We should probably at some point talk about pass keys, because Apple's pushing them really hard, Microsoft's pushing them really hard, and Google is pushing them really hard. And what a pass key is just basically a piece of code that you have on your computer that identifies that, yes, you really are who you say you are. So you won't have to type in a password when you go to a website. Quite often, people steal websites by setting up fake websites that look like what you think is a real site, and you type in your real password, and at that point they have your real account name and real password to the real site, and then they use that for bad, nefarious things. And so Apple and Microsoft and Google are trying to get us to use pass keys. But the way in which Microsoft is doing it is different from the way Apple is doing it, and it's different the way Gmail is doing it. It's kind of interesting because Apple was the first one with the idea, but Microsoft and Google didn't want to do it the way that Apple did. They wanted to do it a slightly different way. And it could be just they're trying to work through the hoops to have a unified way of doing this. But once you have a pass key set up for an account, it should be transparent between the three of them. But if you just step back a second, you'll realize that your pass key for the New York Times and your pass key for Google, Gmail, and your pass key for your password in Chrome for the New York Times could be 3 different things.
Hmm.
So it's a little bit complicated.
Okay, thank you.
I have another question about email. And the 3 devices, I have an iPad, an iMac, and an iPhone. And the mail comes in to all the accounts, but if I delete it on my iMac and then remember to empty the trash, that's fine. But then those messages are still on the iPhone and still on the Mac. And, and that's very laborious on, especially the iPad, to just, you have to move them and put them in the trash. And I
Yes.
don't know what setting I need to change in order to have it be when I delete it. If I delete it from my phone, it should be gone from the computer and from the iPad, but it's not.
The answer is that if you're talking about messages, as in Apple messages, the one of the things that you should do is to make sure that your messages are synced via iCloud. iCloud is where Apple stores photos, where they store documents, where they store passwords, where they store messages, email, everything goes through iCloud. If you sync your accounts through iCloud, then your Mac knows that the message account that you're using, if you delete it from your Mac, it should delete it from the other ones as well. However,
Okay, well, yeah, I don't know how to do that, so I'll have to find it.
Easiest way is to show you. Share screen. If we come up here to up at the top of your preferences, system settings, you can actually, let me show you this on an iPhone, because I want to make sure that I've got this set up properly anyway.
Good.
Yeah. I saw this earlier. There you are. Okay. And if I come up into settings, up at the top in your iPhone, and it also works in macOS, if you click up at the top where it's got your picture and your iCloud account and everything, where it says iCloud, it says, what do you want to go on there? And if you turn on photos, iCloud mail, passwords, all this sort of stuff, you turn those on, it will sync them so that what appears on your iPhone is the same as what appears on your iPad, is the same as what appears on your Mac. And the good news, bad news is you got to be a little bit careful with photos because it can easily overwhelm your account. Kathleen and I, we share a 200 gigabyte account, so we're not too worried about that. But for a lot of other people, it could overwhelm your account. And if you do this, you have a better chance that the messages will get deleted. Having said that, there are some problems with this, and the biggest one is that I ran into this all the time. You can have multiple message strings talking to the same person. My daughter, I have one message string that goes to her and Kathleen. My daughter's name is Laikara. So if I send it to Laikara and Kathleen, that might be one message string in messages. But if I send it to Kathleen and Laikara, even though they're the same 2 people, it'll create a separate string.
Yeah.
And because it's a phone, if I send it to my daughter's phone number, it'll be a separate thread than if I send it to her email account. So if you just think about Kathleen's email account, my daughter's email account, and then switching the names back and forth, you could come up with dozens of different combinations for the same 2 people. And that gets a little bit complicated if you try to delete the message on your Mac because your Mac doesn't have a phone number. Your Mac is only going to get those messages if they go to the email account. If they go to the phone number, your Mac's not going to see it unless you set up your Mac to respond to the phone numbers, which you can do. You can say, if it goes to this phone number, put it on the Mac anyway. But just for the sake of argument, there are dozens of different combinations, and Apple can't fix that problem because the protocol that Messages uses is something called SMS, and SMS was invented long before Apple came along. SMS it stands for Simple Mail System. It was invented by the phone companies when they had pagers. You know those old little pagers that used to have 128 character messages? That's where Messages comes from. It was used by pagers. Nobody has a pager anymore. Every single pager company in the United States has gone out of business, but that protocol is still used for Messages. So yes, you can delete it, but you're going to be frustrated as I am, and there's really nothing Apple can do or you can do to fix that. Unless you're just really disciplined in how you send messages, which nobody is. You do it on the spur of the moment as something occurs to you, and if I send it to Kathleen and Laikara, and then I respond to Laikara and Kathleen, I've now got 2 threads going. And if I use their phone numbers, I could have a dozen threads going for the same conversation. So
well, I generally use my iPhone for messages, and I don't message from my computer. So
yeah, I'm just explaining why it's difficult to kill them off, because each device interprets that slightly differently. And if all you have to do is just change the recipients, whether use the phone number instead of the email, or the email instead of the phone number, or if you're sending it to multiple people at once, just list them in different orders and you create new threads. And because it's a really, really old protocol, and it's really stupid. The big advantage of using messages for sending messages, Apple Messages for sending messages, is that it goes as data. If you send it to the phone number, it always goes as a message, and the phone companies count it. So if somebody has a very limited account that only allows 100 messages a day, they'll get charged for those, like 10 cents, 15 cents a message. But if you send it as data, it's invisible to the phone company. The phone company doesn't see it, and yet the people on the other end still get it. So messages are really quite powerful, and it really, really, really torqued off Verizon and AT&T and everybody when Apple came up with it. But it's still using that old protocol in order to make it compatible, and that makes it difficult. If you notice that you get messages and some are in blue and some are in green, if you get a message from somebody and it's green, it means that they have an Android phone. If it's in blue, it means they have an iPhone. And that's really convenient, because it means that for things like you want to send a memoji, or you want to send lots of things to somebody who's got blue messages, they'll get it. There's a good chance if you send it to somebody who's got the green messages, they won't get it, because the message client on Android is not that sophisticated.
Well, one thing I do like about the iPhone and messages is that when you send it to another person with an iPhone and it says delivered, you know it's gotten there.
Yes.
But with the other kind of phones, you don't know.
No, and Google has actually tried suing Apple to get Apple to help them make their client better. And they went to a judge with that as the basis of a suit, and the judge literally laughed at them and threw it out, because no, Apple's not a research and development agency for Google. So that didn't work.
My daughter and son-in-law live in Australia, and my daughter has an iPhone and my son-in-law hates Apple, so he has an Android. So I can text back and forth with my daughter with no problem. It's it's free and all that stuff. But for my son-in-law, I'd have to add on international to my Verizon plan, and to be able to text back and forth. So we use that messenger in Facebook to communicate back and forth. That's what we came up with.
Yeah, I I cannot begin to tell you how much contempt I have for Facebook Messenger. I refuse.
I'm with you. I hate it.
Yeah, I refuse to answer Facebook messages except for one relative. But anybody else sends me a Facebook message, I'm not ever going to reply.
Yep.
Any other questions?
I had one maybe quick question. I'm using Sonoma on my new MacBook Pro M2 Max, and a strange quirk seems to crop up when I'm using either the trackpad or my mouse in Safari. When I'm just moving the mouse along the screen, it just changes web pages for some instantaneous thing, and goes back to my home page. If I'm on some other website, all of a sudden it just blinks to back to the home page. And luckily there's history, so I can go back to where I was. But so I checked on the internet, and several other people said they had this problem, and no one knows how to solve it. Some people said, okay, change your trackpad speed and don't use tap to click. I tried that, it still does it. And so I don't know what's going on there. I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
This is on your trackpad or trackball or what?
I have the laptop MacBook Pro trackpad, and I have a wireless mouse as well. And it doesn't matter which one I use. If I just move the cursor, trying to click on something on a web page, all of a sudden it just jumps. Now it jumps back to my home page, and it doesn't happen all the time. It's like intermittent. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. But it's really annoying. And so a lot of people had the same problem, but no one knows why it happens, or it's just on Sonoma, and it's never happened in Monterey.
I don't have an explanation for that. I do know you can run into problems with the trackpad spontaneously doing strange things, but that's caused by the fact that if you have any kind of static charge on your body, when you come near the trackpad, it responds as if you're touching it, and so you can have ghost movements.
Oh, do you that could be it? That could be
well, if you normally see that in the wintertime when it starts getting cooler. It hasn't been that cold though, but if you turned on the heat in your house, you could be just a static charge. I will tell you something that I did, and I did this long ago because I have 2 degrees in history, but I was a computer professional. I only wear cotton, and before I sit down at a computer, I always wash my hands. There are 2 reasons for washing. Well, wearing the cotton, if you're wearing cotton, you can't build up it's harder to build up a static charge. But the washing your hands does 2 things. It gets the oils off of your hand, but the other thing does, touching the faucet in your home is grounded. And touching the faucet grounds you, and washing your hands washes off the oils and static. So it's I've been religious about that, and it cracked me up because the last 10 days my granddaughter was here from England. She's 6, and she wanted to use her mother's iPad. And before she did anything, she went into the bathroom, washed her hands, and I thought, she is trained well. Of course, my daughter, that was first thing she started using a computer when she was around 6, and I said, yeah, wash your hands. So apparently my daughter has passed that on to her daughter.
Well, thank you. I think I'll give that a shot. It does sound like the symptom though.
And the reason is that the way the trackpad works is through induction, and you can create a similar type of field just with your hands if there's a static charge on it.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Can you disable the trackpad or?
No.
Oh, you can't. Okay.
No,
No.
not really.
When your MacBook turns on, it knows there's an iPad, and there's
right.
And you really don't want
to do that, yeah.
To mess with that. Anyway, it's 7 o'clock, and now I believe So we will start the program. I don't have the president or vice president, so we'll just skip reports from president or treasurer, so we'll skip reports from them. Apple, in case you hadn't noticed the pattern, Apple in the spring, they have major announcements for hardware. In the start of June, they usually have their Apple Developers Conference, which they talk about new operating systems that they're coming up with. And then in the fall, they release the operating systems. And in September, they released a new version of operating systems for watches, iPads, iPhones, HomePod. HomePod, most people don't know that it gets updated because it happens kind of invisibly. All kinds of stuff, including the Mac. And this year was no exception. A lot of people, if you read some of the commentary sites, they say, well, they didn't really do much. It was all just cosmetic. And that's not true at all. Apple made a whole bunch of security and privacy changes. They made several changes in terms of the functioning of the operating system, and then they made some cosmetic ones. For obvious reasons, because I'm going to do a demo, we're going to focus mostly on the cosmetic ones because those are the ones that I can actually show you. But as an example of the kind of things that they have behind the scenes, they've greatly cracked down on privacy restrictions. You will see this sometimes when you launch Safari and you try to go to a site that you've never gone to before, and it just takes your browser a little while. And that's because the Safari is trying to create a secure tunnel between your machine and what you're talking to. And if the other site isn't set up properly, it'll take a while and it'll try A, it'll try B, it'll try C, and eventually it might just give up and say, I can't get there. And yet if you launch some other browser, it might work. And the reason for that is that Apple is getting really, really picky about security for websites. It's when you launch Safari and try to go to a site, it checks it against a blacklist that Apple automatically updates on your machine every time you turn on your machine. It checks it against a blacklist of compromised sites and just really bad sites. It checks the security certificate on your site. And a certificate on the site that you're going to. It checks to see that your machine is actually properly configured. And if you ever have your machine stolen, one of the things that it does is that when the thief launches, assuming they can break into the machine, and right now it's kind of hard to break into the machine if they don't have your username and password, but assuming that the thief can break into the machine and you've reported it stolen, when the thief goes to that website, Apple looks up a list of stolen machines and tracks their location and then notifies people, hey, this stolen machine is at this address. And it's using GPS location with IP to tell people where the stolen machine is. So it's doing a lot of stuff to protect you that you don't actually see. The other thing they're doing in terms of just on the security front and privacy front is they are greatly cracking down on how you can share things. You want to share photos, you want to share video, you want to share a lot of things. Apple's very picky about checking the security of the people you're sending it to. So if you are sending it to, Mike Johnson, and it thinks you picked the wrong Mike Johnson, it might argue with you about that. And where it does a lot of the processing now, particularly if you have an Apple Silicon machine, I can ask Siri for the time, and Siri will give me the time. In the past, it used to ask Cupertino, okay, this guy is located in Washington State, and my Siri in another room is giving me the time. I could ask for the time, and it would have to ask Cupertino, he's based here, what's the time there? And it'll come back and give me the time. Now, if you have an Apple Silicon machine, all of that processing goes on the machine. It'll give you the time, it'll give you weather, in which Siri asks for the weather instead of asking it for you. And so it'll just give you back the weather. A lot of things it can process on the machine. Now, if you ask for, I can't remember what it was. Kathleen and I were wondering when a movie came out. And so I asked Siri last night when this movie came out, and Siri came up with an answer. It can't do that kind of processing on your computer because it doesn't know that. So it had to go out and ask, but came back instantly with the answer. So it's doing a lot of that on your machine in order to protect your privacy. Google recently was sued by the European Union for violations of, oh, stop it. My phone's trying to answer all these questions that I just asked. Google was recently sued by the European Union for, Google has this thing called incognito mode, where if you fire up Google Chrome and you go to incognito, you have a private tunnel and it doesn't share your name or your gender or anything about that. However, it still collects that information. So it doesn't know your name, doesn't know your gender, but it knows that this person on this machine at this IP address looked up Dockers, and it looked up support hose, and it looked up panty liners, or what. It doesn't make any difference what it is you're looking up. It knows that that person was looking for those kind of things, and it keeps track, and it creates an electronic profile that they sell to advertisers. So on one hand, they said they were protecting your privacy, but on the other hand, they were not protecting your privacy. And the European Union is charging them, I can't remember what it was, $6-8 billion fine for this, and they're protesting this. But Apple, when you ask for things from Siri, even if it has to go to Cupertino, Apple doesn't give that stuff away, doesn't tell anybody about it, doesn't keep it. They get rid of it. So they're doing a lot to protect your privacy, and it's invisible. So I can't really demonstrate that. I can just tell you that that happens. But there are some things that I can demonstrate. So I'm going to start off with the iPhone, because the iPhone is the hardest thing for me to demonstrate. But it so happens that I have the means, so I'll do it anyway. And I did it wrong. I'm not going to do it that way because I screen shared earlier and then I killed it in a way that I can't share it again. Drat.
There's a little tiny icon at the top of your screen in blue that just, I think that's new. Maybe that has something to do with it.
Oh, here it is. I found it.
Oh, okay.
All right. One of the things that you should note is that, as somebody mentioned, there's this little tiny icon up here. This icon means that I am sharing my screen with something. Unfortunately, I managed to kill it, so Kathleen can't see it anymore, but that icon means that I'm sharing my screen with something. I can share it with my computer, or in what I was trying to do is also share it with my TV, but I managed to kill that off. So that's new. This part up here is called, do you remember what that's called, Kathleen?
I can't see it, it's hard.
Dynamic island.
Dynamic island. And I managed to kill it off again. Hold on a second. I need to turn on mirroring so Kathleen can see what I'm doing. Speaking of which, I'll show you how to turn on mirroring. I killed the TV, so I have to turn the TV on. And I turned the TV completely off. Oh, well. Oh, yes, I can do it that way. Siri, turn on TV. Didn't want to. Well, so much for that part of the
Site 24/7, and we have a lot of support, and we can do
Okay.
this for a long time. New video tonight.
Okay. Back to my not terribly well done. Eh. Well, phooey. I can either mirror it to the TV or I can mirror it to you, but I can't do both. So I'm just going to tell you what it can do. They've added more control panels to the iPhone that allow you to do all kinds of things, including screen mirroring and adaptive listening if you have a hearing aid and a bunch of other stuff. And I was going to show you some of that, but I guess I'm not going to. Instead, I'm going to talk about some other things that it did. I took some photos and I want to show you kind of some different things you can do with the photos. These photos were taken on a new iPhone 15. And if you look at the sizes of them, this one here is 2.3 megabytes. This one's 3.28 megabytes. This one's 6 megabytes. This one's 3.345 megabytes. So this one that's 6 seems a little bit different, but the other ones aren't that odd. Then you look at the dimensions. The first one is 4032 by 3024 pixels. The next one is 4032 by 3024. This one is 5712 by 4284 pixels. This one's 4032 by 3024. If you are really good at math, you'll realize that most of these are 12 megapixel, but one of them is 24 megapixels. But they all seem, not that big. But if you export them as JPEGs, you'll see that there's a dramatic difference in size. The HEIC, and I don't remember what it stands for, it's high efficiency something or other, is Apple's format for cramming an awful lot of information into very little space. And when you export them as JPEGs, you'll see that they're actually much larger. So this one that's 4032 by 3024 is actually 5 megabytes. This one is 3.985 megabytes. This one's 4.69 megabytes. But the one that was 5,712 pixels across is actually a 10 megabyte picture. So if you have this new phone, it can take really, really, really high resolution pictures, but only with the standard camera. And there's a reason for that. And if I look at these photos, open them up. This one is taken with the wide angle lens, and it uses the standard camera, but it's just in wide angle mode. This is the standard camera in standard mode. And if I blow this up, you'll see that it's really, really, really detailed, even if I blow it up, because it's a lot more pixels there. So very, very, very detailed picture of this maple. This one is at 2x, and this is at 5x. And the way in which Apple did this is actually quite clever. If you look at professional cameras, a lot of them have what's a Pentax lens. Pentax is the name of a company, but it's also the type of box it has, where the light bounces around off of mirrors on the inside of the camera to increase the focal length without having a huge camera. And Apple did the same thing, only in this very, very thin iPhone. It's the same, basically same size as regular iPhones, but it does it either 6 or 7 times. It bounces the light around using mirrors inside of the camera to get of it a longer focal length. The farther it is from the lens to where it's recorded, the larger something can be at a distance. So that's what they did, is they stuck a bunch of mirrors in here to increase the focal length without increasing the size of the camera. That was one trick. The other thing is that it's image stabilized, so it bounces around with the motion to stabilize the motion. So you can take a telephoto picture with this new camera and it's still image stabilized, or you can take a video and it's image stabilized because it's got a bunch of little sensors in there that move it around as your body moves around. You can't do a huge amount of moving, but you can bounce around quite well. And it's also very good in low light. I took these photos today at 4 o'clock. And as you see, it was very, very dark and rainy. It was pouring rain when I took this. And yet that photo looks really, really nice and rich. The exposure on it's just fine. Very, very wet, but nice, rich photo in dim light. And that's the new photo that they new camera that they have in the new iPhone. But a lot of the other things that are in iOS 17 will work on any camera produced since the iPhone XS camera. It's backward compatible, but some of the features won't work unless you have the newer hardware. But in terms of most of the things it'll do, as an example, on the front, you can have an image, and I'm going to hold this up. That is a custom image on the front of the camera that I added, and I added the fonts at the top where it displays the time. That's all custom. It has an interface that allows you to change that sort of stuff, and you also have custom cards for some of your contacts. So if Kathleen calls me, let's see if I can show her card. If Kathleen calls me, I get a full screen of that photo. It fills the entire front of the camera. So I can just tell at a glance that Kathleen's calling me. And you can set that up for any of your contacts that you feel like. So a lot of nice things that they did with it, in addition to the privacy and security issues. So quite impressed with the new operating system. And if you have an iPhone that can run iOS 17, I highly recommend that you install it without any hesitation, because among other things, it's much more secure than prior operating systems. Oh, the other thing I wanted to show you is that Apple has these widgets. Up here in this corner, you'll see a widget that has a world clock. And the world clock, it shows time zones for here, for Tokyo, for Alexandria, Virginia, and for London, because I have various relatives in those places. But it used to be that you could only have an image on the front page, but if you move internally, you can now have as many widgets on any page that you want. So as many widgets as you want. And what a widget is just a larger kind of preview of what that app would do if you were running that app as a whole. So the world clock, if you run the world clock, it looks like this, but the widget doesn't take up nearly as much space, and it's just in that upper corner. So lots of different things have done with widgets and customization. And on the iPad has added widgets. Again, you can have one widget before, and now you can have a widget on every screen. And the iPad also has, one of the things that I really like is that has health data. In the past, there's a health app on the iPhone, but it can have an awful lot of information, but it's on a fairly small screen. And on the iPad, you have a much larger presentation, so they can have a lot more detailed data. And the health app on the iPhone will allow you to hook into things like Olympic medical systems health records. So their patient portal, you can suck all that stuff into Apple Health and have it all in one place. You can get how far you walked that day. You can get how many breaths per minute were recorded by your watch, as well as get your lab results from going to the clinic and having your blood drawn all in one place. So lots of very good changes, large and small, on the iPad as well. On the Mac, this first slide doesn't really tell you much. It just tells you that Apple says it runs on all these platforms, which big deal. Here, they were really happy with the fact that especially on the Apple Silicon machines, they can get really fast games running, which I'm not a big game player, so didn't really care too much about that. But this particular one shows profiles where this individual has a profile for home and a profile for school in Safari, and I'm going to demonstrate that in a second. But they've had profiles for Safari before, but they were kind of klutzy and I didn't use them. I used profiles on Chrome all the time, so that if I'm doing something for my church, it's different than for the user group, and it's different for me, and so on and so forth. And now they've got profiles in Safari that actually work quite well. The other thing that you have are widgets. So there's a time widget here and a weather widget, and this is a photo widget and reminders and all kinds of things with widgets. And I can't show you this because this is trying to show you a new feature in FaceTime. In FaceTime, if you're doing a FaceTime presentation with, say, 5 or 6 people, you can now insert yourself into the image and your screen will appear behind you. So it looks like you're standing in front of a blackboard, but this gentleman's actually got a computer in front of him, and FaceTime is fake projecting the screen behind him, and he's just kind of seamlessly in front of it. So it looks like he's got a big whiteboard behind it. But that only works with FaceTime. So I can't show you that. However, they have some things that you can do with Zoom, and I'm going to stop screen sharing to show you that, because this is also part of their presentation. And that is, they've implemented something called gestures. Some of these gestures I find difficult. Like, for example, they have gestures where I can have a heart, and I can rarely get this to work. But if it works right, you should see hearts bubbling out of my hands, and I don't happen to see anything. The other one they have is that you can have a thumbs up, and it'll create a thumbs up gesture. Does everyone see that? Okay. And if you can have a thumbs down, and it'll give you a big thumbs down. But if you have 2 thumbs up, you get fireworks. And if you have 2 thumbs down, you can pretend that it's Washington any time of the year, any time at all. It just starts raining. And you can have, let's see, bubbles if you do this. And if you like Star Wars, you can do, well, that's the wrong one. What's the one for? I can't remember. There's a way to do lasers, but I don't remember how to do it. Yeah, I don't remember. Anyway, there's a way to do lasers as well. These are called gestures. They work in FaceTime, and they'll also work in Google Meet and in Zoom, obviously, and other things as well. So the next time you're FaceTiming with someone, if you want to give them a thrill, you can use gestures. And I'll post speaking of which, I should post something else, but I'll do that when I go back to showing my desktop.
So do those work on the iPhone and the iPad with iOS 17?
I know they work on the iPhone. I don't know if they work on the iPad because I haven't tried it. But and some of the things that I'm talking about may only work if you have an Apple Silicon machine. The iPad and the iPhone have Apple Silicon, but some of these things may require newer machines than I don't happen to know. It may require an Apple Silicon machine for some things, but I want to get back to my desktop. And what was I going to show you on the desktop? Oh, widgets. This is a widget that I have, and you don't see it on my screen because I have two screens, and this is on my other screen, showing when I snapped this was several days ago. This is the weather in Squim, and it's showing you the weather. Here's the various time zones. These are one thing that a lot of people don't realize. There's a little tip thing built into the Mac that'll tell you how to use new features, and it also exists on the iPhone. There's an application called Tips. There's an application called Tips on the iPad. Just launch it and go through it, because you'll learn things that you probably didn't know. Here we have some news headlines, and here's the battery level of my keyboard and my wireless mouse. I have widgets for these, plus some other things, but those are the widgets. And you can have them all clustered together, or you can have different widgets on different screens. So just go to town with widgets. Another thing that I've talked about, I told you this was true, but I never actually showed, and I'm not sure that it will work, but I got to try it, is that you can now, if you have an Apple Silicon machine, you can now get a lot of the apps for iPhones on your Mac. And one of the things that I like to play is Mahjong, which is an ancient Chinese game. And most of the Mahjong games on the Mac have commercials, and I couldn't stand the commercials. Well, this Mahjong game is for the iPhone, and it doesn't have commercials. So I immediately glommed onto that so that I can play Mahjong. When I'm on hold, I will quite often play Mahjong or Solitaire or something, just because I'm stuck on hold and I don't want to be on hold. One thing you will notice with these games that were ported from the iPhone is they have very simple interfaces. If you go up under the menu, there's really nothing there, but this will take you home and you can play a new game, and it's set up very, very simply, because it's basically from an iPhone app, and there's not that much you can do with it. So let's go here and exit to quit out of it, or I could have gone up to the quit menu. But that was basically unchanged from an iPhone app to work on a Mac. And on the Mac, it's got a bigger screen, so it takes up more space, but it's a fairly limited set of interface, because there's not much you can do with it. But on the other hand, from Mahjong, I don't really need a heck of a lot. So that's kind of cool. And I thought I'd just show you that. Something that a lot of people don't know why you would ever subscribe to Apple Arcade. I will tell you one reason to subscribe to Apple Arcade. The arcade games have no advertisements. So if you like playing games and you can't stand the advertisements, you can subscribe to Apple Arcade and they don't have advertisements. And now I want to show you Safari. This is Safari, and when it came up, you'll notice that there's something new up here. It says Lawrence. This is basically my standard how I want Safari to come up when I'm working for me. This is showing my website. This website has lists of my publications, and there are quite a few of them publications. And this is where I put them. And I've only got like a third of them up, but I put them up on this site. So when I launch Safari, I'd like to make sure that the site is actually up. So that's my startup screen. And then I have things that I use all the time, news sites and personal things having to do with like going to Olympic Medical and church and whatnot, and tools that I use quite often. That's for me. But say I'm doing something for Strait Macintosh user group. I can change who I am by coming up here and saying, I want a SMUG window, and I close this. So the SMUG window comes up and it's got the SMUG website, but then it has things today that I want to talk about. So I've already pre-populated this. So one of the things I wanted to make was the gestures that this overlay that you can use in Facebook. That's one of the things I wanted to show people. And then they call it reactions, those gestures. So you can have hearts will come pouring out in a nice little thing. Thumbs up will give you a thumbs up icon, thumbs down, balloons, rain, confetti, and oh, that's how you do it. Lasers. There we got the lasers going there. And fireworks. And so you can do that with these gestures. And the other thing I wanted to talk about was the attendance form. I'm going to talk about that in a second. And what does Sonoma run on? If you go all the way back, this is the Apple Sonoma page. You go to all the way down, almost to the very bottom. It comes up with this box here, and it says iMacs from 2019 and later, Mac Pro from 2019 and later, iMac Pro 2017, Mac Studio, MacBook Air, Mac Mini, MacBook Pro. It has these here. So if you want a machine that runs the new Sonoma, it needs to have one of these. I will tell you, looking at this list, it kind of gave me a dead giveaway. All of these machines either have a T1 or T2 security chip, or they have a powerful graphics card. And so that's what they need for a lot of the features that they're using. The T1, T2 security chip is what allows Siri to accept a Siri request for the time and give it back to you without actually telling anybody else, asking Apple about it. That's done with the security chip. It sanitizes those things and sends you back information, and it won't accept some types of requests because it knows those are bad things to do. So iPad, similarly, down towards the bottom, it's got a list of the machines that it runs on here. Basically, iPad Pro 12.9 inch second generation and later, iPad Pro 10.5 inch, so on and so forth. List of the machines it runs on. And iOS 17 down at the bottom of the page. It has a list of machines that it runs on as well. I forgot to tell you about one thing. I don't know if I can actually display it. If the iPhone is turned on its side, it will give you in a nighttime mode where it gives you the time and shows anything that might have popped up while you were sleeping. So you can use it as a, don't go up there. It'll, you can use it as kind of a nighttime clock. And I like this so much that I got a stand to sit beside the bed so I can refer to it at night in case I wake up at 3:30 in the morning and want to know exactly what time it is. Oh yes, if the lights are off, it turns red, so it doesn't ruin your night vision.
I haven't been able to find to work like that on the side. It just wants to be in portrait mode. I mean, it's still, when I turn it sideways, the text is, still, it's not right.
But it shows the clock and everything.
Yeah, it shows the clock and it stays on all night, whether it's plugged in or not. But it doesn't turn sideways, and I know it's supposed to.
How when it turns sideways, is it if it's not, it's got to be fairly vertical in order for that to work. So if it's at too much of a slant, it won't. Huh. How old is your phone?
It's brand new. It's a 15 Pro Max.
Well, see, that's a problem.
I went from an 8.
I know it works on an iPhone 11, a 12, a 13, and a 14, because when my daughter and son-in-law were here, while we were playing around with these, and I know it works with those, so I'm not sure. Do you have the phone set up to auto-rotate?
Well, now maybe not. It does so on music videos, but I don't know about otherwise. That's someplace I can look into and see.
Anyway, I'm going to put the links for these pages that I was showing. I'm going to put these in the chat window so that you can see what it is I'm talking about. So this presenter mode for FaceTime is going to be here. Oh, that's terrible. I will clean that up. And Sonoma reactions. You notice that on that URL that I posted, this one up here, that I chopped off some stuff at the end of it. I'm going to explain that in a second. This is the requirements for Sonoma, the requirements for iPadOS, and the requirements for iOS 17. I'm going to go back to, what was it, this first one that had the ridiculous URL. When you get these really long URLs and you want to send them off to someone, what you want to do is look for, well, let me see, first of all, let's see if this works. Yes, it does. A lot of these things are tagging information, and it's trying to find out what kind of machine you're using, because it'll give you different kinds of information depending upon what machine you're using. But also sometimes it is like who you are and where you are. And Apple doesn't do that with their URLs, but a lot of places do. So you'll go to some place, and generally speaking, what you want to do is get rid of anything past the question mark. And I will show you what I mean by that by going to the New York Times. You go to the New York Times. I can't find server. Okay, I'm pretty sure you're there. And I know why I did that. New York Times, continue. And you want to get this article. So I want to share this article with somebody. I don't care. I want to share this article with somebody. And oh, this was actually fairly, it doesn't have a bunch of stuff after it. But what happens is that when I first went to the New York Times from Google, and I clicked on the New York Times, well, now it's not going to do that because it's cached. But if you end up with these really long URLs, look for a question mark. A question mark is not a legal character in a URL. And so what people do is they use anything after the question mark to send tagging information about you to whoever it's going to, so that New York Times will know that I came to the New York Times from Google. And it's a way of getting ad revenue. Well, I don't want to tell people where people came from, so I will go through and just chop off everything after the question mark in the URL. Anything after that question mark is not necessary. So just go through and just get rid of everything after the question mark, and it'll still work. And this first one here had a bunch of strangeness in it. And it was Apple trying to find out, was I talking to Apple from a Mac or from something else? So it added a bunch of stuff to the URL that it really didn't need. But the other thing I wanted to show you, since I mentioned this is for this user group meeting, is that I can also stick things in that I frequently forget, such as the October sign-in sheet. So I tap the sign-in sheet, and I'm going to grab the URL and paste it in down here and ask you that you please go and sign in, because it helps me keep track of what we're doing. But you can have as many profiles as you want, and I want to show you how to set them up. And it's really just super difficult. You go to Safari, go to settings, go to this thing called profiles, say plus, and say news. And here you can use it for doing news or something. And you can pick an icon to show what it is. And I don't know what color we would call news. Since the New York Times is supposed to be the gray lady, we'll call it gray. And create profile. So now we have I guess that's not gray, that's brown. Okay, I don't care. So my personal one's got an icon of a person. The SMUG, because I teach things, it's got a picture of a graduate's hat, and the news is a briefcase. But now that I have this, I can add bookmarks to this. So Washington Post, I say add bookmark, and it adds me where I want the bookmark, and I say that I want it under news, add, and now when I go back to that news profile, it'll say when it's got one tab, and the one tab is the Washington Post. And if I go to bookmarks, news has the Washington Post. So that's part of that profile. The SMUG profile has other things. My favorites, which is what I have at home, has lots and lots and lots of bookmarks. But I can separate them depending upon what it is that I'm doing. And it's if you're working, which I'm not doing, it's a great way to separate your work from what you're doing at home. But since I do work for my church and I work for various other things, it allows me to segregate that stuff so that when I'm looking at church stuff, I'm only looking at church stuff and nothing else. So it's a really quite convenient way to do things. And Apple finally did it right. The first couple tries that they did at this was not pretty, but this is pretty well done. And do I have any questions about anything that I've talked about?
Lawrence, could you say again how you get your iPhone to be like a night clock?
Oh,
I didn't catch that.
you plug it in and you turn it sideways. You turn it sideways,
Okay.
and it will eventually change to night mode, I think is what they call it. And it's not doing that because I keep on moving it. But you just hold it sideways. I leave it plugged in because I charge my iPhone at night. And so I leave it plugged in and it recharges, and it acts as a nightstand clock.
Does it have to be plugged in?
It does not have to be plugged in.
Okay.
I don't know that, but Mr. Brown says it doesn't, so it doesn't.
I have a special little charger for my Apple Watch, and that sits there, and if you touch it, it tells you what time it is.
The reason why I like this, and the reason why I keep it plugged in, is that way I don't have to touch it. I can just look at it, and it tells me what time it is.
Okay.
I'm a light sleeper, so if I wake up in the middle of the night, I like to know, am I rested now or am I not? So it's a good way to do it. And in the morning, sometimes when I'm feeling lazy and a call comes up, when it's in this nightstand mode, it shows who's calling me, and I can decide whether or not I want to ignore them.
Right.
Something that you may not know, you can, when you're setting up your Apple Watch, you want to pair it with your phone. It's almost impossible not to. It's part of the process. If you get a phone call and you know you don't want to answer the phone, if you cover your watch, just put your hand over the watch, it silences the call.
Uh-huh. Great.
You don't have to answer the call and hang up on them or anything. Just put your hand over the watch and it silences the call.
I
And if
just
I'm lying down in bed and I don't want to answer the phone, just put my hand over my watch, shuts it down.
Mhm.
I am very lazy.
Okay.
Just a little update on the nighttime clock thing. I plugged it in and it works sideways like it's supposed to.
Oh, okay.
So is that with just the new operating system?
Yes, it's part of iOS 17.
Okay. Thank you. And we need to sign in, but we don't know how.
Oh, I stuck the URL in the chat on the side. And if you look at the last one I posted, which says docs Google.com, if you just click on it, it brings up this form that's on front of me. And you just fill in the, add your email, add your first and last name. And the reason why I say first and last name is that I've had several people just say Mike or Susan, and that doesn't tell me who you are. So put in your first and last name and then check the box for which meeting this is.
Okay, so, but that's your computer we're looking at.
That's my computer, but if you click on this URL over here, it'll bring it up on your computer.
Where's that URL?
It's in the chat window.
In the chat window.
Yes, down at the bottom of
Oh,
the,
I see it. Okay, then it just says to everyone.
yes, but I posted it earlier and it might be that I need to post it again for you because they scroll off.
Oh.
So.
Well, I can write you a message.
No, it should be there now. And you just click on it and it'll pop up the form. Any other questions? I covered a lot of different things. So I may not know the answer, but I'll make something up.
I have a question. I put something in the chat earlier, but it didn't trigger a red dot on my chat window, and it didn't seem to go through to any of you. So I'm not sure why.
No, I'm not seeing the form either.
Do you have this chat window open?
Well, I can see
I
yours.
have it open. Yeah.
Okay, okay, chat. And then I just see to
So if
everyone.
you scroll.
If you click on document Google, it'll pull it up.
Document.
There should be a message above. The chat that's saying to everyone is at the bottom, and above that should be the message that I just sent, which is a URL, and it should open this window.
No.
This form.
I got it just fine.
Oh, well, okay. Sign in. Okay, I'm totally lost the meeting.
You lost the meeting? I can hear you.
Yeah, I know, but I can't see.
Oh, look under chat.
It's gone. All right, I'm the person. No, okay. Okay.
Click on your Zoom icon on your, that should bring it up, I would think.
I think she might have lost the Zoom window.
Yeah, she lost
Okay,
the Zoom
I'm
window.
at launch meeting, so I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
No, click on
What-
Zoom, on the Zoom.
Yeah, down in your launch bar down at the bottom of the screen, if you just click on Zoom, it should bring
Okay.
it up.
Got it. But am I still looking at your window?
You should be.
So, okay, I see to everyone. I can still see the one that you posted. It's in your, and it just says to everyone.
Yeah, and it should say below, it says https docs.google.com, blah, blah, blah. And if you click on that, that should bring up a browser window and this page.
FaceTime video effects, I don't think I want to do that.
No, those are earlier up.
Yeah.
I
Docs.
posted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 links.
Okay. Docs, Google, Conference, Apple. No, went to Apple Sonoma. Didn't work. Okay. That's right.
It should appear at the bottom of the list.
Oh, new message. Okay. There we go. Got it.
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry, that took so long.
What do we want to do next time? Something I would like to do at some point is browsers, because there are lots of different browsers out there and they have their strengths and weaknesses. One of the good news, bad news about browsers, in order to demonstrate browsers, I have to use bandwidth. And I'm using the bandwidth to actually send the Zoom video out to you, which means that it may not work particularly well. But at some point, I would like to talk about browsers. And I would like someday to show people how I created the SMUG website. It's a piece of software called WordPress, which is available to anybody. It's web-based, so you go to a particular website and you can create a website of your own.
Hey, Lawrence,
Yes.
you mentioned earlier that you might want to do a little talk on passkeys.
Yes.
That might be a good topic, but I don't know how you can demonstrate passkeys.
Well, I can use my fake user to demonstrate the passkeys. My problem is that I'm having difficulty coming up with something that I can really demonstrate, because a lot of this is invisible if you're using passkeys. So it works, and as far as you looking at it in a view session, you just say, okay, so you went someplace, and it wouldn't tell you, it wouldn't explain how the magic actually happens.
Yeah.
So this is one of those cases where the musician wants to hide the magic. I want to show how the magic happens, and trying to.
Well, with my new M2 laptop, MacBook Pro, it has a thumbprint button in the power button, and a lot of times it'll say, just touch your thumb or put in your password. And
Yes,
it's much easier to touch my thumb than type in a password.
That's true, but again,
is that a passkey or
no? That's an encrypted credential. A passkey is a little bit different. Essentially, it's a passkey to your computer, but it's not a passkey to something else. That's actually something else. When you press your thumb and the thumb sends a passkey to a website, it's not sending your fingerprint. It's sending a piece of code that says, yes, you really are who you are. So trying to explain how something that people can't see works, there's some cognitive issues I need to overcome here. I haven't quite figured out how to do it.
Unless you took a movie of Kathleen doing it.
It's something I need to think through, because I've thought of several things and I say, no, that's not going to work. It has to be something that you can see a cause and effect. I used to teach computer security to people in the government. And that was one of the hardest things to do this, even when I was talking to IT professionals, to show them how something was working when there was nothing visible to them, that it was a computer talking to another computer. It was a challenge. And even when at the day before I retired, this woman asked me to come over to her computer, and because she said something wasn't working, and I said, what do you want me to do? And she says, just stand there, it'll work when you're beside me. So she worked for a science agency, but she believed in sympathetic magic, that if I was there, just the magic alone would happen. And she tried to do it. She'd failed at a dozen times, and it worked. And was I responsible? No, I wasn't. But trying to trying to show what was really happening was it's a challenge, which is one
Right.
reason why people insist on having stupid, 8-letter passwords that they reuse for everything. They say, oh, this is just too hard. And that's why the United States is responsible for 99% of the credit card fraud in the entire world,
Wow.
because we are still the only country in the world where you hand somebody a credit card and they accept it. Anywhere in Europe, you hand them a credit card and you also have to provide a PIN. There has to be that secondary authentication. In the United States, nope. Steal somebody's credit card, go into Starbucks and you can buy yourself coffee. There's no verification that you're who you say you are. The only place in town that verifies who you are, aside from the banks, is Costco. And that's because your picture is on the back of the credit card. Not that they look at it, but if they wanted to, they could verify. So trying to explain computer security is a challenge. I'm
So,
not saying I'm
Lawrence,
opposed, I just haven't figured out how.
the book about the next operating system, Sonoma, is
Yes.
that a book in book form or is it a download?
It's a downloadable book, but you can print it, but there's no printed books on it because, and there may not be. I want to tell you the dirty secret about a lot of printed books. Well, before I do that, since I happen to be showing my screen, I want to show you something. I'm going to, if I can see the icon, here it is. This is my Apple Books, and I'm going to move this thing out of the way and search for Sonoma. There we go. This is the Apple ebook on Sonoma from Take Control Press. And it's got a nice table of contents, and it's even got an index in the back, and it shows you, after there's some preliminary things telling you how it works, tells you how to check what operating system you have and what it runs on and all that kind of stuff. And then it takes you through step-by-step how to upgrade and a bunch of other stuff. And at the back of it, it's even got an index. The nice thing about these electronic books, is that, by the way, I have 7,000 or 8,000 electronic books. So it helps if I spell correctly. Take Control Books, and we go here, and you find what you want to know. You want this book on Sonoma, and it takes you here. Click on this, tells you what the book is for. It comes in 2 different flavors. You can download a sample if you want, but it comes in 2 different flavors. If you buy it, you have a choice of either a PDF or a EPUB. EPUB is what Apple Books uses. All Apple Books are in EPUB format. And the nice thing about Apple Books is that, well, never mind. The Apple Books are much better than PDFs. But if you decide that you want to book, you say you add it to the cart, and then you go and pay for it, and go to your cart and pay for it, and then it downloads immediately to you. So you can go shopping for the book, you can read the table of contents and all the stuff you would in a bookstore, and then download the book and start reading it immediately. You don't have to wait for Amazon to show it to you. Now, why don't they print computer books? If you go to Amazon right now, and you type in macOS Sonoma and look at all the books that they have, you'll see that this one here is $30, which is a lot more. It's a terrible book. macOS Sonoma for seniors, terrible book. This one here is, you notice when it was produced, it says it was produced on October 12th. This is something that Amazon has, where you can make instant books out, but these people, they're really not very good books at all. And the ones that I really hate are these for dummies books. You should never think that you can't do something on a computer because you're a dummy. And so why Wiley ever came up with this For Dummies series, I really cannot stand their books because they start insulting the user right off the start. But you can find the book you want on Take Control Notebooks, download it immediately, don't have to wait for Amazon to deliver it, and you're up and running. And it runs right out of iBooks on your Mac, so you can read the book while you're doing things at the same time. Works, and these books work on the iPhone and the iPad just as well as they do on the Mac. So you can actually read it off your phone and play with it on your computer at the same time. Really, really prefer these to physical books for computer books.
There's usually
yeah,
sorry,
go ahead.
I was just you go ahead.
When I left, when Microsoft came up with the new version of Office about 10 years ago, I distributed electronically to everybody, and then people said, oh, you can come and take the documentation away. We had 1,200 copies of Microsoft Office that we bought. When I went and collected the documentation came in a box that was 1.5 feet long and weighed a ton. Of the 1,200 sets that I collected, 1,150 were still in the shrink wrap.
Oh.
Nobody read them. The nice thing about an electronic book is you can use the search function to go to the part that you're interested in. You don't have to flip through all these pages trying to find what you want. So for computer documentation, they're much, much better than paper. If you want to read them novels on paper are still good, but computer documentation electronically is much, much better.
Okay.
And we still haven't decided what we're doing next month. And half the people have run away. So
well, I have a question. It's kind of personal for you. Are you going to upgrade to the new phone? I mean, we spent a lot of time happily about the new system for the iPhone, the new.
Yes.
Yeah. And I'm wondering if you're going to get the 15.
This is an iPhone 15 Pro Max.
Oh, okay.
I'm not going to reveal any secrets, but Kathleen insisted I get it, and it arrived just before my birthday earlier this week.
Okay. All right.
I take a lot of pictures, and I can't begin to tell you that the difference between the 2x magnification that telephoto that I had with my old iPhone and this 5x is startling. It's not like the 200 that I have on my professional camera, but for just I was taking photographs of my granddaughter riding a horse, and I could take a picture of my granddaughter and the entire horse, and I could take a picture of just her face, and I didn't even have to move. I could take it with the same phone just by flipping through the telephoto settings, and it was glorious. Plus, it was raining heavily, and the phone didn't care. Whereas my professional phone, I really don't want to take it out in the rain. And my daughter's from Britain, my granddaughter's from Britain, so the fact that it was raining didn't slow her down at all. And she decided she really likes horses. We started her out on a pony, and then we moved her to this full-size horse. And later on, they were saying, did you like the pony? No, the pony was trash. Well, that's not really what she said, but when she felt the full-size horse, she thought that was way better than the pony. I don't know why, because I'm not 6, but she had a blast. And this is the new phone, and it's really quite cool. One thing that's amazing is the size of the screen is the same as the size of the screen on the 13 in terms of physical size, but the phone itself is smaller. Really quite, because the screen goes much closer to the edge. It's really quite spiffy. what are we doing next week, next month?
I vote for browsers like you mentioned.
Second the vote.
That sounds good.
I'll
Okay.
third it, fourth it.
All right, we'll give that a shot.
Okay.
Maybe the difference between a browser and what a search engine is, like DuckDuckGo. I don't know if that's a browser or if it's just a search engine.
It's both.
Yeah, I heard it's a new browser
Yeah,
that's available in the Apple Store.
yeah, it's both. I will warn you that I know a great deal about browsers because I've built roughly 500 websites. So I know a lot about browsers, but if you're willing to put up with me, I'm willing to cover it.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And anything else before we go?
Thank you.
Yeah, have a good night, Lawrence.
Yep,
Thank you
thank
again.
you.
Bye.
All right. Good night.
Good
Night.
night.